Hello, friends, and welcome to Leadership Happy Hour. My name is Chip Lutz, unconventional leader, and today I've got Robert Bradford with me, and I'm pretty excited about it simply because Bobby B, as he's commonly known in the cool circles, he's known as is just a really cool dude. I met him a few years ago in Philadelphia. We talked a little bit. Afterwards, we exchanged emails. It's like, why haven't we met before? You know, we dig each other's energy. How come we haven't connected? So, and he's an expert on strategic planning. And from my aspect, I've always looked at myself as a really good tactical guy. I'm really good at tactics. I can look strategically, but I'm really good at just getting stuff done. Tactics. So I'm really, excited about having him on the show today, talking a little about strategic planning made simple, because I'm a simple guy. I pretty much operate on 8th grade level most of the time. So anytime people can bring it down for me, I'm always really good. So welcome, Bobby B. Cheers. Welcome to Leadership Happy Hour.
Thanks, Chip, and thanks for having me over for a drink.
Anytime you get to hang out with friends and have a cocktail, it's always good for me.
Exactly.
So if you could tell everybody a little about what you do, where you're from.
Well, right now I live in Vermont. I'm originally from Michigan. I years ago went into business with my father doing strategic planning seminars. And we did strategic planning in our family's business. And over the years, we, after we sold that business, I went to Wall Street. He did his own thing for a while. And then we got back together and started building a seminar business, which was very, very successful for many years. And we now have about 10 people working in our company. Mostly former CEOs who do strategic planning, and mostly small to mid-sized businesses, sometimes some large ones. And that's all I've done for, more than 25 years now. So I just do strategic planning over and over and over again.
I didn't know you were on Wall Street. What'd you do there?
Well, I was at Chemical Bank, and it was sort of the early days of derivatives, and I was helping them put together a way to evaluate them and keep track of what they had so that they could balance out the risks that they were taking on with that.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
You say derivatives, and I'm just like, I'm in awe. Anytime he uses a big word, I'm just like, wow,
There's a lot of math involved. So
again, I'm always amazed, and enamored with people that, think in math terms. I normally think in cartoons. So anybody that, anybody that can, has the math concepts and get them down, I'm just like, I'm not worthy.
But
so
for me, it's an emotional thing. I have emotional reactions to numbers. So
I do too. Usually it's to have another drink. Cheers. That's me in math. Nobody wants me balancing their checkbook ever. That's the way things usually should work. So I was checking out some of your stuff, and like I said, we've talked a little bit before, but what I'm really I think is cool is that you make strategic planning simple. How do you do that? Because like I said, I'm a tactical guy. It's like, if you tell me this is where we're going to go, Chip, it's like, all right, cool. Then I automatically start thinking about what are the things I need to do to get there, and working on the plans to get to the overall objective. How do you, when you go out and talk to leaders about making it simple, how do you do that?
Well, you just picked up the 3 most important steps right there, Chip. You start with where am I? Where are we is the first step. And then you have to figure out where you want to go. And then you have to figure out how you're going to get there. It's simply those 3 steps. As a business gets larger and more complicated, you have to look at a lot more data to figure that out, because underlying the question, where are we, for example, is this really fundamental problem that's been bugging human beings for thousands of years, which is what's going on, what's really happening, and why.
I woke up this morning thinking that.
Exactly. So, I think it's really pretty much the first thought a baby has. They open their eyes and they go, huh? And you have to figure that out. And usually in strategy, that's one of the primary places where we can add value. There are a bunch of different places to add value in the process, but one of them is helping people to get past the preconceptions they have about what actually is going on. Because most people, like in your business or anybody else's business, you think you know what's going on. And in most businesses, it's really like peeling an onion. You have to get down, you can keep peeling layers away, and every layer you peel away gives you some new insight that can make you more successful. So that it's a big part of it. And then where we want to go, we have to look at, not just our desire, we want our business to be huge and make lots of profit, of course, but I like to ask the question, well, why would we make profit? And the answer, of course, is we make profit because we offer something to our customers that's incredibly valuable, and we offer it to them in a way that they cannot substitute anything else for it. So if you're selling shoes and they're just shoes and they're not any different from any other shoes, you're going to end up selling your shoes at a low price store. You're going to sell them at Walmart or something, or the dollar store, because nobody cares whether they're yours or not. But if you can get people to care about it for some reason, then you can be like, Prada or Bruno Mali or someone like that, where people will pay thousands for your shoes.
Interesting. So, like tying the emotion to it is, the care part. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's a big part of it, because think about when you spend money. If you're going to spend more money to get something, whether it's a beer or a pair of shoes or a car or anything, a plane ticket, if you don't care, then you're just going to buy the cheapest one. And there's no profit in that for most people.
And that's pretty much how I judge everything. Two things I care about, things I don't.
There you go. It's simple. You got to keep it simple.
Yeah, that's how I judge everything. And most things I care about are very chip centric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Of course.
Yeah. I don't think that makes me a bad person. It just makes me a human being. I think most of us are kind of wired like that. I just am. Well, I'll admit it. I'm just that. Just that vain.
Well, but also, imagine, a caveman a million years ago, if he sat and saw a tiger and said, what is the meaning of this tiger in the world, and wasn't thinking like, what is this tiger going to do to me? He probably ended up dead. So it's probably a survival trait too.
I like you tied that in. That was pretty good. So in thinking about where I want to go, I think about that like in a lot of different, in the Navy, we had, always had the strategic plan from up above, but then in both of my command tours, and when I was in charge, it was looking at, okay, where do we want to be? And, I pulled the team together. We would talk about different possibilities on, what we could get done. But even then, always had to tie into the overall larger strategic plan. We just couldn't sit out there out by ourselves. So, what's the best way to get people to, leaders to think strategic? Does that make sense? Is that a decent question?
Sure.
Like I said, what's that?
Sure. There are two analogies I like to use if you're trying to get people to think strategically. The first is, you think about it in military terms. Strangely, I did my thesis on naval strategy, and I've never worked with anyone in the Navy. There are people in the Army who use our stuff, but no Navy.
I'm your first Navy guy. You're topping your chair.
Actually, no. Awesome. There's I believe a reserve admiral that is a CEO of a company I worked with some time back. Really great guy.
Yeah, that outranks me.
Yeah. Okay. But here's the thing: is in military terms, you have to think about the job of the admiral is not to win every single battle, right? The job, your job is to win the war. Okay. Now, the captain of an individual ship, he pretty much wants to win that battle because he doesn't want his ship to sink. And that's his job. But the job of when you go higher up in the organization, the strategic job is not about, you can't fight a war and say, okay, nobody's going to get killed or no ships are going to get sunk. But you can fight a war and say, okay, we're going to make choices. And sometimes they're very difficult choices. And those choices will enable us to come out on top and ultimately win. And so that's one way to think about it, right? Mm-hmm. The second way to think about it actually is also sort of a naval thing, which is it's like steering a ship, right? As ships get larger and larger, you can't have every hand on the steering wheel. You've got to have somebody have their hand on the steering wheel who has an idea of where you are, because if you don't, that's called lost, I think, in nautical terms. And then some.
I think anybody's terms that's called.
And then you have to have some sense of where you want to go with the vessel. And then you have to take all these environmental variables into account, the waves and the currents and the wind and how much fuel you have. And that will determine how you're going to get there, or at least your ability to get there.
Right. Well, that makes perfect sense because, and I would assume that, you're like for us, we would always constantly adjust. And using in nautical terms again, just shifting the rudder a little bit so we could get here and there to get where we want to go. So with the work that you do on and I like the way you put that on the basics of strategy. One time I taught an undergrad strategic management class, and that was basically not my forte. They asked me to teach. I was like, yeah, I could do this. Yeah, I could do that. Anybody asks you to teach something, I could do that. So, and that was basically the thing I got from the whole class teaching was, strategy is really about, knowledge where you're at, where you want to go, some kind of path on how you're going to get there, the three basics. But on looking on the assessment on where you're at in the work that you do with different companies or, different leaders, what are some of the things that you do to help them assess where they're actually at?
Well, the thing I like to do is I like to drive the initial discussion down to the very basics of data. What do we do and who do we do it for? And I like to slice that up into bite-sized chunks so that we're not looking at 40 different things and we don't have these giant spreadsheets. We want to have a manageable number of chunks of information to think about. So psychologists tell me that a smart person can keep like 10 or 11 things straight, and a normal person can keep like 6 or 7 things straight. So I like to keep it pretty simple and keep it at about the 7 to 8 things. So I like to, slice up the business into 7 to 8 chunks and say, what's going on in this chunk? What's going on in this chunk? What's going on in this chunk? And we look at things like, who is the market? What do they want? How big is the market? Who are the competitors? What advantages do we have in this chunk of business? What disadvantages do we have in this chunk of business? And how do we stack up against our competitors? So it can get a little complicated. You got 8 chunks and, a bunch of different competitors. But ultimately, being able to answer those questions really simplifies a lot of the strategic questions.
All right. I like that technical term, chunks. Because I grew up a fat kid, so it's an endearing term for me. Scott on here asked, what type of clients you work with now? Who are some of your clients that you work with?
Last year, almost all of my business was outside the United States. Actually, for some reason, I'm like a rock star when I go overseas. And here, I do programs. Sometimes I have trouble getting 10 people to show up. But the last time I was in Dubai, for example, I think there were, 50, 75 people in the room. And they pay very good money to see me in other countries. And so that's
expert means you're from out of town. So
I'm from very much out of town. Yeah. And so, yeah, my material has been translated into a couple different languages. And I'm actually next week going to Singapore and then to Kuala Lumpur to do my program there. But that will be in English, which is nice. Don't have to use a translator. And
did you say Kuala Lumpur?
Kuala Lumpur is the largest city in Malaysia.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
I've heard of it. I'm gonna have to pull out
a native language. It means Muddy Inlet, but it's a beautiful city. If you've ever seen a picture of the Petronas Twin Towers, these 2 very, very tall towers that look like they're made out of crystal at night, that's Kuala Lumpur. Beautiful city. Yeah,
I'd never heard of it. Actually, when I get home, I'm gonna have to pull up my map so I know. I'll start keeping a map of where you are around the world because Scott put on here is like I once presented an Akron, which I think is hilarious.
I've never presented an Akron, so there you go.
I don't think I've been to Akron either. I've been to other places over there.
So, but domestically, a lot of most of my people work with mostly American companies. So we work with a lot of companies in manufacturing, financial services. We've got some people in the IT space. I've worked with airlines, trucking companies, you name it, distributors. It's all across the board. And we have a very hard sort of ethical rule in our company that we never work with competitors. So if I'm working with, actually this happened with the guys I'm working with in Wisconsin. One of their competitors asked me if I would come do strategic planning for them. And the first thing I do is I ask the CEO of my client. I says, is this okay, or would you consider him a competitor? And if he does, my commitment is to my clients. I want them to beat the other guys. And if you have two clients you're working for, how do you decide which one's going to win?
Well, because then it comes down to who you like the best.
Right. Yeah. So just pay me a little more, and I'll make sure you're the winner.
Who sent me a Christmas card last year? So in looking at the strategy, I mean, because I know that within organizations, we get caught up in like, this is our vision, this is our mission, these are our values. And, so do you get mired into the whole vision and versus the mission thing? Because a lot of times I've always had trouble kind of like separating the two, that if this is where we're going, that's kind of like the ideal type of, this is where we're going to be, and the mission is just the tactical of, how we're going to get, to me, the path on how we're going to get there. I mean, so. Yeah.
I think a lot of that stuff is important because it's sort of the foundational basis of your decision making. If it doesn't fit who you are, you shouldn't do it strategically. But most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the companies I work with, they already have that pretty solid. And we'll spend 15 minutes talking about it, make sure it is solid. If it's not, we can back up and do something with it. But I think a lot of people, especially in the consulting community, spend way too much time on it because there's a lot of fuzzy nonsense you can sell as a consultant. And I don't like selling fuzzy nonsense. So
I'm going to give you an amen. I'm going to give you an amen on that, brother.
Brother Bob. There you go.
Because I think we get mired in some of that, the whole mission, vision, values, and I agree that it's core. I think the great thing about having a great strategy of knowledge of where you're going to go is that it makes every decision pretty easy. Is that you just have to ask yourself as a leader, because how it is when you're starting a new project and people get excited about the project and they start throwing ideas. We should do this. We should do that. We should get a pony. We should have cotton candy at every meeting. Yeah. And so as a leader, you're like, well, I don't know. But then you just have to ask yourself, looking at the overall strategy where we're going is like, does this support where we're going? If the answer is yes, we should look at doing it. If the answer is no, we probably shouldn't. Yeah. That's what I think is, having an overall, picture of where we want to go. And after we looked at all the chunks.
Yeah.
I tied back there to the chunk.
Good. Yeah. I saw what you did there.
So I think that, well, from my perspective, anyhow, do you do any work on, because I think when you start having the excitement about a new project, strategy, we're going to go, the things we're going to get, like I said, people get excited, but still it's the issue on, people figuring out how they do it, that whole path portion of it. So, what have you seen that has worked well for leaders on getting their people engaged on figuring out that path?
Well, a couple of things that are very important in my mind is, first of all, I want the people who have to do the things to move you forward towards whatever your objective is. I want them to figure out what they need to do, because they know it better than I do. They know it better than the CEO does.
Right.
So that's really important. I think the important thing from the strategic perspective is the CEO and the top management team should basically set up very, very specific, measurable objectives that are stated as results, not actions, and let people figure out how they're going to achieve those results and give them that responsibility. Also give them the authority and the resources to accomplish that. So right. Give them an objective and let them figure it out.
Yeah, empower them to get it done. Like, you're probably, well, I'm a big John Kotter fan. His book Leading Change, back at the turn of the century, fantastic book. And I like saying turn of the century, even though it was only 16 years ago, but it seems like yesterday to me. But what I really liked in his book was, one of the steps was, planning for and celebrating short-term wins. When I hear you talking about, I mean, that's what, I hear about, because, our attention span with any kind of thing is like starts high and ends high, but in between we have this big lull. And so on empowering people, like you were saying, I think that really gives us the opportunity of, people staying excited about the overall objective and having some kind of tie-in or buy-in as to, why they should be involved in the overal thing.
Absolutely.
I like how, you put that as, as far as, having them figure out how it should be, which I think with our younger generation, especially, like I think about my youngest son, he's 18. He didn't want to be told what to do. He wants to know what it needs to be done, and he wants to figure out how to get it done.
Right.
And where does he go first?
He goes to Google.
And Google and YouTube.
Oh yeah, and YouTube. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Which I never think about ever. From my perspective, when I always think about, oh man, I should probably get a book on this. I should probably go to the library and research this. He's just like, he's already on YouTube. How do I do this? I just
see for these kids, and I try to be as much like that as possible because I'm very mature, so I better. I think it's really interesting to notice that the difference between knowing something and not knowing something is really, really small for them. Like, when we were kids, if someone said, how do you build a canoe? You would go to the library and look for a book on how to build a canoe, and then you would read it. And these kids, I mean,
you might talk to a couple Indians about it.
Right.
Hey, how did you build this canoe?
So today you just go to Google and you watch some videos, and here's a problem I had building a canoe, and you have to do it just like this, and here's the right kind of wood, and you're going to get all that instantly. So knowing and not knowing are almost the same thing today.
I never thought about it like that. That is very true. That is very astute, Mr. Bradford. The difference between knowing and not knowing is just a click away.
Mm-hmm.
That is tweetable for anybody that's listening today. You can tweet that hashtag Leadership Happy Hour at Robert Bradford.
There you go. So yeah, I think when you get into the execution side of things, I like to give people an objective, and I like it to be really clear. And I've been reading some stuff about games lately. And one of the things I find really interesting about games is I think my work is fun, but most people don't. Most people don't think like, oh my God, it's Monday. I'm so excited, right? So when they're going to work, they think it's not fun. And the difference between a game and work is partly that in a game, you have a clear objective, a clear way to keep score, and you have a clear way to know whether you won or not. So I think you want to give people those kinds of things, especially when you're asking them to do something difficult that's never been done before. And the most strategic objectives are going to be like that.
Well, I'm a I should say, not only a competitive person, but I love LOVE, gamesmanship at work.
Mm-hmm.
The competition, figuring out what we need to do. We get there, spiking the ball, and celebrating the win, which I think is inherent to all of us, within our society here. We all pretty much enjoy that. There's a pretty good book. I don't know, you probably read it, The Levity Effect. It talks about, using humor at work, but also that, adding that element of celebration at the end of a hard work. And the people will do some pretty crazy stuff just for a Snickers bar. That, here's the objective. Let's do this. And we're all going to celebrate. And they give an example in the book of how it was a production line, and that they asked, went back to the teams like, hey, if we get this, what do you want to do? And they I think that in the book they were talking about they wanted to fly paper airplanes off the top of the building, and so they worked double hard that week to break their production level so they could all just build make paper airplanes and fly them off the top of the building.
There you go.
Which is crazy, because we think that a lot of times we need to have these huge budget, these elaborate reward systems, but people just inherently want to win. They want to win. They want to do well. And then, what are we going to do as leaders to celebrate that? Mm-hmm. Big high five with you on that one. Actually, I'm going to give you a cheers. Cheers, Robert Bradford.
All right, there we go.
Well, you're supposed to take a drink too. On that one.
My friend Milo has decided he wants to participate.
My wife's bringing a new cat home today. She had a cat that she had for 20 years that was at the end and had to be put to sleep a couple weeks ago. And so she's bringing a rescue cat home today. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. He's pretty happy. Well, he hates it when I leave town. So, and I'm leaving to go to the CSP summit tomorrow. So
what's nice about a cat is that you can leave a cat and it's okay.
That's why I don't have a dog.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I'd have a dog.
I would be on the road for like 3 or 4 days. I'd leave out food, water, and normally the cat wouldn't care if I was there. But as soon as I would get home, the cat obviously missed me, would jump up, get 2 minutes of attention, be like back to like, hey, screw you, I'm good to go now. So that's the only cool thing about cats, you don't really have to worry about them that much.
Yeah.
They're all good.
Yeah.
They're all good.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Talked about knowledge where you're at, knowledge where you're going to go. And I think that what you hit on really critically was inherently, I think, for people in the workplace, and I think that I like the way you put that, people like when they get to work on Mondays, they're not really excited about being there. Mm-hmm. But giving them a piece of the ownership of what's going on, mm-hmm. I think for us as human beings, inherently, we want to know where we provide value. Mm-hmm. That, work isn't just a place where you go to get a paycheck. That somehow, some way, I make some kind of difference in the overall result. And giving them that piece, like you said, I think helps them figure out their value and where they fit, and helps them stay a little more motivated to get things done. Have you seen some really good examples of, clients that you worked with that have done that better than others, that they've just figured out like decent systems on empowering their people or rewarding their people? They think that, hey, these they're applicable to a lot of different people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good to play with it, and it's good to ask people what they think would work best. I've had some clients that have done just amazing things in this area. I have one client years ago, I can remember I sat in on a meeting where they had the every single employee was in the room, and every single employee voted on the company's budget line item by line item, including the salary of the guy who owned the company.
Oh my God.
And we had to talk to him about that because they wanted to pay him a lot more money than we could afford. Really? And yeah, we had to say, no, just because, we're a $50 million company doesn't mean we can pay the owner $50 million.
Was he in the background saying, "Shut up, Robert, shut up"?
No. I mean, he wanted the company to survive, and it wouldn't survive that. So, but the thing is because we asked the employees, I think they were very supportive. I mean, they felt the company's problems were their problems. Mm-hmm. And that built a lot. I mean, there's a lot of goodwill and there's a lot of ownership that's felt in there. It's a little scary for people. I work with a lot of people, in the Midwest and manufacturing. They might have an environment where they're worried about unions coming in and things like that. And that creates a kind of us versus them mentality. And that's a little harder to deal with. And to actually share your books and let your employees, tell you what your budget should be, that can be a little scary at first for a lot of people. But I mean,
yeah.
The thing that I pay the most attention to, because I measure myself on a couple of things. I measure myself on what happened to my clients' sales, what happened to their profit, and how many of the objectives that they set did they get done. Those three measurements are the most important ones to me. And so right now I'm running about an 80% rate on hitting objectives, which is really good. Like the national average is 30. So, 80%, I'd like it to be 100. I pay a lot of attention to the companies that hit 100, and I look at what they do. And they do a couple of things that are really important. One is they create the execution plans with groups of people. It's not just one person or the manager. They get all the people down in a room and say, how do we get this done? They also communicate that really clearly and regularly. So, we create an action plan for every objective in the strategic planning process, and they'll have those stapled up on the wall in their department, or everybody sees them when they walk in, and they talk about it routinely. I always have my clients have a short, usually it's a conference call once a month where we just track our progress on execution. But they will also have the group that put together the action plan sit down before that call and talk about what's going on, where they are, where they're behind, and, if they need any more resources. It's really important for execution, I think.
So, what do you think is the biggest hindrance in leaders or organizations not achieving their overall strategy? I mean, what keeps them from, if they've got this vision, they know where they want to go, what keeps them from getting there?
I think there are three really common things. The first is what I'm just going to call management nonsense. There's a lot of stuff somebody read in a book. There's a lot of stuff.
That's hilarious. Right?
Yeah. Okay. And it's just nonsense. And it's one of those things like, I mean, I know you talk, this is, leadership happy hour. When people start talking about leadership, my first reaction comes from something I read that Scott Adams wrote once. He said, leadership is almost always going to involve something unpleasant because it doesn't take a lot of leadership to get people to do things involving warm cookies. Just leadership is always getting people to do something they don't want to do. So, So you get all this nonsense coming in because people are saying, well, I'm trying to get people to do something they don't want to do. How do I get them to do that? And sometimes there are really good ways to do that. You might ask someone, like, what will motivate you to do this, right? And then someone will say, like, it would motivate me if I could fly a paper airplane off the roof.
Right.
Sometimes people come up, they contrive their own stuff, and it's often nonsense. Right. And that's one of the big obstacles to getting your strategy done. The second one is just trying to do too much. The problem most companies have that I work with is not having enough ideas. Everybody, when I start working with them, they say, Robert, you're going to give us some great ideas. And I might, but my view is your problem is not that you don't have enough ideas. Your problem is that if you try to work on all of them, you're never going to get finished with any of them. So I want to get people to focus down on a few. So I limit people, and it really drives them crazy because I tell them, look, I'm not going to let you have more than 10 objectives, for example, and they want to have 12, and they just think I'm an ogre when I tell them they can't. But a year later, when they come back and see, oh, we got this stuff done, then they realize that they were trying to get 20 done and getting halfway done with all of them instead of trying to get 10 done and getting, all the way done with them.
Right.
So that's the second thing. And the third thing is related to that. It is believing that you can do the impossible. And one of the things I always try and get people to do when we're putting strategy together is put themselves in their customer's shoes. And we're talking about the example of shoes earlier, for example. When you're buying shoes, well, first of all, a lot of people buy them online today. Secondly, for some people, buying shoes is an experience they want to enjoy, and they'll go into an expensive shoe store and they'll bring you tea. And you know that when they bring you tea, you're going to pay a lot for those shoes. You just know it right away, right? That's one thing. Or you go online, you click some buttons, and you get your shoes.
I've never gotten tea with my shoes.
Really? Yeah. Just you have to go to more expensive stores. I
guess I'll stop going to Payless. I mean, what?
Yeah, they're not going to bring you tea at Payless. That's right. So, and then the thing you sort of have to take 2 or 3 steps back from is just say, look, if I'm selling the same shoes as other people, then I've got a problem, which is why are people going to buy their shoes from me?
Right.
Okay. Now, if I'm selling different shoes, then I have a different problem, which is how do I communicate with people that there's a difference that means something to them? Because the shoe store that's going to draw you in is going to be different from the shoe store that would draw, say, Liz Green in, okay, or Neen James. I mean, these different people want different things, and it's important to understand that. And a lot of people think, no, we can do everything. We're going to have all different kinds of shoes. We're going to be the one-stop shop of the shoe world. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee that you're not going to see any competition, for example, between Prada and Crocs. Okay, they're in 2 different universes. They have 2 different markets. And if you ever saw the 2 together, it would be because one of them decided it would be a funny joke. And and there are people out there, and I work with these people all the time who think that they can offer everything from the Crocs up to the, whatever is the really, Fendi or whatever is a really expensive shoe today. And right. The problem is you can't do that really unless you have infinite resources. If you have infinite resources, we can talk about a whole different set of things. But right. Most people don't.
You can open different stores for each kind.
Right. Yeah.
To provide a different kind of experience for each type of customer.
And there are people who do that. Look at the beer industry. You have in the beer industry, you have companies that own a high-end beer all the way down to the cheapest beers. Anheuser-Busch has stuff all the way from, what is it, Busch, or they have an even lower one, don't they? Or is Busch the lowest? I don't remember if they own Meisterbrau. That might be Miller. But
who owns Meisterbrau?
Yeah,
who owns Blatz?
Right. So, but that's
blue.
the low end of the spectrum, right? And then at the high end of the spectrum, you have people who are selling beers for $10 a bottle. And that's right. A whole different game. But Anheuser-Busch owns, they have beer brands in the entire spectrum, but they're very, very separate. And each one has a separate strategy and a separate identity.
Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting. Looking at that if you have a smattering of different things that you offer, that you really need to have a different strategy for each, and think about the customer experience for each. And I like what your second point when you're talking about looking at the gamut of the different things that you're going to work on. That what I would tell people all the time is that if everything's the priority, nothing's the priority.
Absolutely.
You can't work on everything at once. I mean, it's you've got to look at what you're doing. It's like when, it's the difference between serving, decent food and running a buffet. It's just the difference is that when you start running a buffet, your overall quality goes down. And, you can't run a buffet. If you're going to do, you can do everything on your list halfway good, or you can do 2 or 3 things really, really good. What's your choice? What do you want to do? And usually it's like, well, I want to do 1 or 2 things really good. Well, yeah, we all do. But our society, we're kind of fed this line that we can do it all. Hey, it's sky's the limit, baby. You can handle it. But really, you can't. We have to really focus down on those things. That's good stuff, man. Good stuff. You got a good brain, Robert Bradford. Check out the big brain on Bobby. Cheers to you.
There you go.
That was a Pulp Fiction reference, if you're a Pulp Fiction fan.
There you go. No, I never saw the movie. I started to see the movie, and I just couldn't care about any of the characters, so I left.
Oh my gosh. It's one of those things where my brother and I will watch it. I'll be watching it, and I'll start texting him lines from the movie. Mm-hmm. And like, you're watching Pulp Fiction again. And he's like, yes. And then he'll turn it to the ssame channel, and we'll have a text fest back and forth on different lines from the movie. Just because we're both Tarantino fans. Yeah, I guess we're both brothers and like the same things. We used to do the same thing. We used to watch this John Wayne movie called The Sons of Katie Elder.
I've never seen that one.
Oh, well, we'd both seen it 100 times, and we would make reference to the movie. And he had actually, for my birthday one year, bought me the VHS tape of the movie. And we were watching it, and then we stopped watching it. And the movie, a decade later, is still stopped in the same place where we stopped watching it together, because I don't have a VHS player anymore. just the way it worked out.
Yeah.
So for me as a leader, looking at, how should I put it? I'm sitting there in my office and I'm thinking, we're really not going anywhere. What are the best tips you can give me as a leader on, thinking, a little bit better about where I want to go? What would you tell me to do? If you came in and you're like, Chip, you're going nowhere, this is what you need to do. Just like simplified.
Well, I think one of the first things you need to do if you're going to do that is you have to build a foundation of receptivity to change. You have to say to yourself, hey, I'm not going anywhere, and it's because the way I have been doing things isn't working. And by the way, just getting to that step can be a huge win for a lot of companies.
Giddy up, cowboy. I know that's true.
Yeah. So you have to, and it's really hard because people will just instinctively say, well, this is the way we do things. And you have to back up and say, okay, that's the way you do things. And you're a $50 million company, but you want to be a $500 million company. And if you want to be a $500 million company, you might have to do something different. You're not going to get there incrementally in the next 2 or 3 years. It's not going to happen. So you have to ask that question. And then the more fundamental question you have to ask is, why would my customers be enthusiastic about me doing really, really well? And if you think about it, as a customer, you may buy things from companies that you're enthusiastic about them doing well and being successful. And you want that kind of support from your customers. You want your customers to look at your product or service and say, hey, that's a little more money, but it's worth it because I trust that this company is going to deliver on something that nobody else delivers on. That's important to me. It doesn't have to be important to everybody, but it's important to me. And I don't know. that's the first thought process I want to get people into. The first thing you have to do is just look at where you are, and where do you like what's happening, where don't you like what's happening. And if you push forward, in the first year after we do strategic planning, one of the things I love to ask people to do is look at where it was just easy to push forward, and other places it's like you're hitting something. There's an obstacle, there's pressure back. And if there's pressure, you have to ask yourself, why is it there, and can I do anything about it? And maybe the answer is no. And maybe the places where it's easy, we ought to just lean into those, because there's something that we're bringing to the table that makes that direction easier for us.
Right. I like that. That's good advice. You've given me a lot of good things to think about. In my own personal business, I was like, as you're talking, I was like, I need to think about that. That's good. That's good stuff right there. All right. Well,
I first started thinking about this reading the work of Lao Tzu, who was a Chinese philosopher, I think the 4th century BC. So he was a contemporary of Alexander the Great and Demosthenes and people like that. And he basically said that, a successful army should be like water. It should be flowing down, always flowing downhill. If it comes to an obstacle, it flows around the obstacle. It doesn't, and over time it might wear down the obstacle, but that can take 1,000 years if it's a big rock. And it's a great way to think about strategy. So
that is a great way to think about strategy, because we could spend a lot of unneeded time and effort trying to move that rock, or we can just wear it down after time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why I do a lot of my work overseas right now. It's a lot easier for me to get really good clients in other countries right now, because there's a lot in the United States. I think there are a lot of people who say they're doing strategic planning, and what they're selling is just nonsense. So
nonsense. And let's do a SWOT analysis and call it a day.
Yeah. Or somebody who read one of my books and said, okay, we're going to do what Robert said here.
I'm not Robert Bradford, but I did read one of his books. Let me share it with you. Oh, that's hilarious. I know a lot of people like that. That have never had an original idea in their life, but they're happy to share other people's with you. Well, I appreciate you spent a little bit of time with us today, sharing your experiences, your huge brain, thinking about strategy. Like I said, I'm a really good tactical guy, but you really give me a lot of things to think about strategically, not in my own business, but I think that, as a leader, things that I, can think about and do to motivate people and get them going towards the end objective. Now, just like it would be like with any happy hour, if we were out drinking in a bar, I would probably challenge you to do something pretty stupid because we're drinking. But since we're not there at a bar, I'm going to ask you a few random questions from my giant Would You Rather book just to figure out where you stand on a few things. All right. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, Robert Bradford, just random. I haven't picked these ahead of time. I'm going to flip through and all right, Robert Bradford, would you rather have a pimento permanently housed in each nostril, or have hairy gums?
I'm going to go with hairy gums.
That's an interesting choice. I'm not going to ask why. I will not ask why on that.
I could tell you why, but because hairy gums wouldn't make it hard to breathe.
All right, I got to make sure I don't pick anything that's too because there's a lot of risque things, and I make sure they don't pick anything that's too bad. All right, Robert Bradford, would you rather be able to communicate with animals, but only the nerds, or be able to read people's minds, but only when they're thinking about aluminum siding topics and issues?
Oh, talking to animals. You're saying, but it's only the nerd animals?
Yeah. I don't know what nerd animals are.
What?
I didn't write
Are turtles nerd animals and squirrels aren't? But you know what? If they're nerds, they're smarter than the other animals. So I'd rather talk to the smart animals, because the dumb animals, what are they going to say? You're going to talk to them, they're going to be like a dumb dog. Be like, food. Yep. It's going to be summertime soon.
Yeah, I'm going to look myself now. All right, good. All right, last question. Would you rather, Mr. Bradford, Bobby B, have taste buds all over your body, or have a malleable stress ball head?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to go with the malleable stress ball head.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things I would touch. don't think I'd really want to taste. That's just
Yeah, and the malleable stress ball head, it's a safety feature, right? That's just one set of injuries you wouldn't have to worry about.
When you don't hit that strategy like you want, you're like, stupid, stupid, stupid. And then it just expands back out. All right, good. I'm good to go.
Yeah, plus it's way more entertaining. Like you show up at a party, you say, I have taste buds all over my body. People are just going to go, ew.
They're going to pick their nose and touch you. It's like, hey, what does that taste like?
I never would have thought of that in a million years, Jeff.
That's what I would do to somebody.
Okay, awesome.
So if people after this are looking for you, where can they find you?
Well, they can certainly go to robertbradford.com, or they can go to my company's website. It's the Center for Simplified Strategic Planning, and our website is CSSP.com. Or they can just Google Robert Bradford and strategic planning, and they'll find me, I'm sure.
All right, good. Well, I appreciate you being here with us today. And for anybody else, if you're looking for me, you can find me unconventionalleader.com. I appreciate you sharing your huge brain with us today. Have a safe travels. Have fun as you go across the big pond next month or next week.
Yeah, next week. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
All right,
Robert.
Thank you for having me, Chip. It's been a blast.
Absolutely, man. Take care, buddy. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.